Hello, friends, and welcome to the July 5th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about policy issues here in our great state and have a conversation about how you can engage in that process. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and today we present the final installment of our four-part series on public education. We hope this series has provided you with a lot of homework and some insights into the complexities of our public school system. After this episode, Weekly Witness will be taking a break while the Texas Impact Board meets to adopt a new biennial legislative agenda. When we return the week of July 20th, you can expect to hear about our legislative priorities for 2023 and how you can work with us to advance those issues. Joining us for today's episode will be Sherry Miller, past president of the Texas Classroom Teachers Association and an amazing advocate for teachers and public schools. My conversation with Sherry will be followed by an informal chat between B and Josh, recorded while I was away. And y'all, they were great. And I think that means that I can probably sneak out more often. They talk about summer mission trips, what they're reading, and how we can make it through what seems to be a never-ending series of bad news cycles. But before we start, a couple of quick thoughts at the top. First, I hope everyone had a fun and safe July 4th, and that everyone has a chance to check out from the news for a week or two this summer. If you're traveling, safe travels, whether you're headed on vacation, visiting family members, or just chilling in your own backyard. Know that Texas Impact staff wants you to have a wonderful time of rest and recreation. Because in a couple of weeks, we'll have a new legislative agenda for the upcoming legislative session, and then it's going to be go time. We will have a Weekly Witness series and a series of faith and democracy trainings to introduce the issues and to help you prepare to make an impact this fall during the election season and on into the legislative session in January. We're going to be rolling out some new cool tools to supercharge your work and some new opportunities for local, faithful civic leadership. So I hope you'll start thinking now about what groups you can talk to and who you can organize to work for a more just and equitable Texas. Because, spoiler, we're going to ask. But for now, back to this episode in public education. As we've heard during the series, public education will be a major topic of conversation, both in the campaign and when the legislature reconvenes. So Texans of faith need to lay down our markers now to make sure that candidates and elected officials know that Texans of faith in their communities support public schools, public school children, and public school teachers. So we hope this series will give you the information you need to understand the issues around public ed and have conversations with your representatives to protect public schools. Joining us for today's conversation is Sherry Miller, immediate past president of the Texas Classroom Teachers Association and an amazing advocate for teachers and public schools. Sherry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
I guess happy summer. I hope you're having a chance to decompress and get some time away.
We are. Thank you so much.
Good. So we are in the middle of this public education series on the Weekly Witness podcast, and I feel like with each one of our guests, we have to start with the recent massacre in Uvalde. And as a leader in the Texas Classroom Teachers Association, please, first of all, just know that our prayers are with you, and people of faith throughout the state have your back and are ready to not just pray, but also to act. So first of all, I feel like I have to ask, how are teachers responding? How are you doing?
The Uvalde shooting occurred actually during the last week of school. That's when a lot of teachers, they're finishing up with their grades. You've got academic awards, graduations, classroom celebrations. Plus, you're also working with your end of the year checkout procedures, which may include completing perm folders, double checking grades, making sure that your room is ready for summer cleaning or for summer school. I believe that this year with the Uvalde shooting, the first reaction for teachers and education personnel was just complete shock. And I think that was also the reaction of many people just across the country, that something like this would happen at an elementary school. In the Killeen community, we're unique in the fact that we have had 2 prior community shootings. The first one was in October 16th, 1991. George Hennard killed 23 people and injured 27 at Luby's in
Oh,
Killeen.
wow.
It occurred on Boss's Day. There were about 150 patrons that were in the cafeteria at the time. It just so happened, for the benefit of everyone, that law enforcement was holding a seminar just next door at the Sheraton Hotel. So the response was very, very quick, which helped with less injuries and, unfortunately, less people that died. We had another one several years later, Nadal Hassan, that happened on post on Fort Hood, November 5th, 2009. I happened to be teaching at an on-campus school at that time. There were 13 people that were killed and more than 30 soldiers that were injured. And the post was shut down at a time that included everyone. No one was allowed on, no one was allowed off. And that also was very, very tragic. So for many of us that were here during both of those incidents, this brought up some of those events for us as well. The teacher response was eerily quiet. I really expected more people to be in shock, but I think because it happened the last week of school, there was so much that we had to do. Everyone was
Right.
just in shock, but quietly stating something needs to be done so that this does not happen again.
So what is that? Do you have, I know listeners will want to do something. Do you have anything from a teacher perspective that you wish listeners would be doing right now?
I think that they need to just make sure that when they do go to a school, respect what many of the schools are requiring. Everyone goes in through the front door. It's not because they don't want visitors to come, but they do want to make sure who all of the visitors are. And there are times when people will say, well, I live down the street, the back door is closer for me to go in, but just know that those signs are posted for a reason. It's for all of the children and the staff's safety.
That is helpful advice. So beyond school shootings, the last few years have been really hard for public school teachers. I have 2 kids in public school, and just know, between COVID and everything else, shortages, it's been hard. So can you talk to us some about the challenges that public school teachers are facing these days?
In the last 3 years, it's been very challenging for teachers. We had shutdown beginning in March of 2020. There was the shutdown. Districts had to quickly create a virtual learning platform. And I don't think the public realizes this had to be created within several days. It was just almost instantaneous. This was not anything anyone ever perceived. So from March to May 2020, everyone was on a virtual platform. The following year, for the school year of 2020-2021, for many districts, it included dual platform instruction. In other words, teachers were teaching either virtually or in person. In some districts, such as my own, teachers were providing instruction on both platforms, either live streaming or recording lessons for virtual students and posting them. Some of the issues with doing dual platform was the time constraints. You have to have time to record. And as you know, when you're recording, there are many times that maybe you make a mistake or something doesn't come out or it didn't record correctly. So you have to go back and redo it. There was a lot of redoing because for teachers, broadcasting was not our first job. So we had to really literally learn on the spot. And then also making sure that the students were accountable, either by attending virtually and then also submitting their assignments, which for some students that did not happen. And it happen, and those kinds of things happen during the entire year. Then in 2021-22 school year, the past year, our past school year, all students returned in most of the state to campus. The big surprise for the teachers was the large percentage of students who came back angry. Many of the students were having behavioral issues, literally refusing to follow instructions. They may be kicking, they may be hitting, they may be using inappropriate language. Every teacher was pulling out every classroom management plan and strategies that had ever been created in order to try to help these students integrate back into the classroom. We also observed that many students were displaying social immaturity as well. For some of our students, if they stopped attending in March of 2020 when they were a kindergarten student and they came back as a second grader, they'd had over a year and a half of not being in school and being used to those routines. And so for some of our students, it was very difficult for them to get back into that routine of learning. And the challenge, as I said, was really reacquainting the students to a formal learning environment, and also including what came with that were classroom expectations. As teachers, we are all hoping that the 22-23 school years will see an improvement, since many students have been back to school for a year.
Yeah, I think we can all recognize that it has been hard, both on teachers, students. Like it's been hard on everybody, and teachers have been heroes in the midst. I know my wife is a nurse, and I know nurses have gotten a lot of love over the course of the last year or two. But I feel like teachers are right there too. It is you all have been heroes, and we appreciate that. So on top of all that, I wonder if there are concerns now about the potential for. We're a public policy podcast, talking with folks of faith. And I wonder if there are concerns about the possibility of diverting some of the funds that you all rely on in public schools to private schools or security or any other number of well-meaning ventures. But is funding moving forward a concern?
I think it is. The impact for diverting funds to private school, either virtual platforms or in-person campuses. One of the biggest concerns, and I think this is why a lot of the teacher groups have been not supporting a voucher program. Part of it is because it would be diverting money from public schools, but the other ones is, are the students held accountable to the same standards that we as public school teachers and educators are required to do? There have been some proposals in the past that have presented a little bit of that, but there have been many that have basically said, wherever the money goes, it's up to that school to determine what their educational requirements are. And I think for teachers, if we're required to get our students to a certain standard, then if our state monies are going to provide education and everyone thinks that everyone should be learning the same thing or the same educational standards, then that should be required of either a virtual platform or an in-school platform.
Right. Along those same lines, talking about the last legislative session and what we might be looking forward to in the next one, can you talk some about the concerns about the legislature's attempts to try to micromanage what teachers teach and talk about in the classroom? I wonder if there's concern about stifling teachers, banning books, those kinds of things.
Okay. And we've been seeing a gradual micromanaging for many years. This isn't something that just came up. It's been happening. Teachers are given X number of minutes per day, definitely in the elementary level, for reading, math, science, social studies, physical education, music, art, whatever they have whatever they're presenting in the fine arts. There are some administrators, and this is causing a concern because I haven't just heard it being done by a couple of administrators in my district, but also statewide, where some of our administrators feel that teachers in a say in a grade level, everyone should be doing exactly the same thing at the same time. So in other words, if an administrator is going through for a walkthrough, maybe it's their day to do walkthroughs. And so they're going through, they should see every, say, second grade teacher, I'll use that as an example, teaching exactly the same thing at the same time. But that's not really realistic. You may teach a lesson that you think is just great. You've got everything covered. And you go to see, whether you give a test, quiz, maybe have kids work on a project, whatever you're doing to kind of evaluate what those children have learned, you discover that your wonderful lesson that you created, they didn't get it. So you've got to go back and say, well, you know what, maybe that strategy with this particular group of students didn't work. I need to take a different approach to it. So there is a lot of reteaching that goes on in education. And even if you look back into your own days as an elementary school student or middle school or high school, you can remember those lessons sometimes that, we didn't quite get it and our teacher had to go back and reteach it. Well, the same thing happens today. But for many teachers, they're not given the ability to go back and do the reteaching. And that is really a problem, because if the students don't get whatever concept they need, they can't go on to the next. And it could be that one of the reasons that that maybe a classroom is not where someone else is, they may have a student that has exceptional needs. Maybe things are going on at home or something's happened in their life. Maybe a parent has suddenly gotten ill with a serious disease. Maybe there's been a death in the family, and that impacts children very, very greatly, or something else has happened in their life. And as teachers, we have to help them through some of this to help them be able to still go on and do their work.
Sherry, I had a kindergartner at home with me for a couple months doing school at home, and I can, if anybody needs a list of all of the things you can do wrong while teaching a student, I've got a pretty solid list. So I recognize there is reteaching that needs to happen. So we've gone through a pretty solid list of challenges school teachers are facing, and I want to get to public policy solutions in just a second. But are there ways that you wish congregations or groups would or could support public school teachers in their local communities?
I think that for one of the things that they can do is really listen to what the teachers in your community are saying that are going on and support them. As a parent, I think that they really do need to support their child's teacher. Sometimes teachers have to tell parents things that maybe the parent doesn't want to hear. I think we all want to have that perfect child that learns everything. The first time you tell them, they make straight A's, but that is not the reality of life. And sometimes students just need extra help, or maybe they need to maybe teachers need parents to help share with us maybe that a child is having difficulty with coping skills. And so many times we'll ask for a conference to say, hey, can you give us some strategies? What are things that might work at home? What can we do to work together? And I think that's one of the things right now that the public can really do is look at teachers as someone that wants to help their child learn, because that's really what we're here to do. I look at every child I have and I think, okay, my job and what I want to do is help this child go from this stage to the next stage, because I want them to be successful in life. And I think for most teachers, that's really what we want to do. And we really do want to help your child. So for the parent side of it, I think if they can listen to their child's teacher and see that their teacher is really trying to help their child be successful, I think that could help. For the public, I think just encourage your district to provide programs and opportunities for all students, whether they're college-bound students or whether they are vocational, but help support those. Don't be afraid to speak at your school board. Don't be afraid to write a letter to your school board members or to the school board president. Don't be afraid to get involved in things like that.
Nice. Good advice for parents and congregations. I also suspect that one of the best things that listeners can do on a policy level would be to pay attention to public education policy, whether it be at the state level or the school board level, and then talk with candidates about issues that are important to you, and then obviously vote. What does the political landscape look like for public school policy, and what should listeners be watching for here in Texas?
I think that one of the big issues this year, in the next legislative session, is going to be vouchers. I think we need to make sure that every dollar that we spend on education is money that is well spent. And so that means that everyone is accountable, whether your child is in public school or if vouchers are approved on some level, that the voucher money is used to educate our students well. And that if voucher money is used, there is a standard at which that educational facility must be providing that education. Also, another one is going to be teacher salaries. I think that is going to be a big, big issue, and it definitely needs to be. A first-year teacher currently in the state of Texas, a first-year teacher base pay is $33,000. Now, many of these first-year teachers have just come out of college, whether they went through a teacher education program or received their degree in another area. $33,000. When you're considering student loans that these teachers have to start paying back, that's very little money for the responsibility and the requirements for the job. In looking and listening at many districts across the state and just having been in Las Vegas, it looks like many of the states are going up to the 50,000 arena as far as being in the $50,000 range for starting new teachers. I think Houston and Dallas and possibly some of the San Antonio and Fort Worth area districts have gone a little bit higher in the 60s. But I think for starting first year teachers, most are in the $50,000 range. Our particular district right now is starting at $56,000. So for a first year teacher, but that is something that definitely has to take place. We have an extreme teacher shortage, and it's been coming along for a while, but I don't think that definitely state legislators did not want to really recognize this was starting to happen. I think that school administrations were hoping that it would not happen, but this is the year that there were, and last year as well. So many retirements are now happening because the baby boomer generation is retiring, but it's not just the baby boomer generation. It is brand new teachers, 1, 2, 5 years, 10 years. We're losing people that really would make very good teachers, but they are just overwhelmed and they're not getting the support that they need. So I think those are two things that will definitely be on that we need to look at.
Two important issues that I know our listeners will be paying attention to. Were you going to keep going with a third?
Let's see. And really, honestly, what teachers want more than anything else is to teach. We're not equipped to serve as law enforcement or mental health professionals. And right now the discussion is out there that we should also be handling those two areas. As to the extent of those two things may be necessary, I think we definitely need more law enforcement involved. And I think we definitely need more school counselors. I think districts are trying to get more counselors, but there's also a counselor shortage as well. So we're getting counselors as fast as we can. But the law enforcement issues need to be handled by law enforcement. They are the ones with that specific training. We are not. And as well as the mental health professionals, they are the ones that are trained to help these children, the ones that especially severely at risk. They're the ones that that can help and help give us ideas and ways of helping these children in the classroom.
That is a solid list for our listeners. Do you have any homework assignments, any challenges you'd like to leave with them today? I guess as a teacher, give us our homework, teacher.
Okay. I think our homework honestly needs to be, as a nation and as a world, we have come through a pandemic that no one ever saw coming. It has divided many people along many lines. And I think we really need to start coming together. We need to give each other patience. We need to be patient with each other. And we still need to be giving people grace. But we need to start working together as communities. And I think if we work it together as communities, those communities start getting larger. You're working as your counties and you're working as your regions and in your state. And I think if we can do that, I think that will help a lot, not only for education, but for other areas in life.
I appreciate the time, appreciate the work. Where can we find more information on the Texas Classroom Teachers Association?
You can go to www.tcta.org, and we have a lot more information on many things that come up. And with, of course, the legislature and TEA, things are coming up daily. So you can check some of those out.
Well, Sherry, I really appreciate the time today, but more, I just feel like we all owe you and all of the other classroom teachers throughout the state of Texas just an enormous debt of gratitude for the work you've done over the course of the last school year, but also the course of the last couple of years in a really challenging environment. And I hope we can take some steps over the course of the next week, over the course of next month, and the next year to make it easier and make it better for both Texas school teachers and Texas school kids. So thanks for the time today. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much.
This week's episode was brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas, Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas, and the COVID Collaborative.
Okay, are we ready? Okay. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Josh, Scott has left us home alone with the microphones, and we have no idea what we're doing.
Scott should not have done that.
No, probably not. But since Scott's not here, I guess you and I just get to talk about whatever we want.
No, I'm going to have to impersonate Scott and say, hello, friends.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever it is.
No, yes. I think it is up to us. It is on our shoulders to decide what our weekly witness audience is going to get to hear about this week.
That's dangerous.
Well, yes. So the reason Scott is not here is not because he is on vacation. It's because he is out on a mission trip with his kids with UM Army. And UM Army, for people who are not initiated, stands for United Methodist Action Reach Out Mission by Youth. And I did not know this until I looked it up, but it started in 1979 in Athens, Texas. And now it's the A of Army stands for action, but in 1979 it stood for Athens. So I know, and Scott has been involved with it for a really long time, and we are proud of him for doing that. But that is not the only mission trip that Texas Impact has had an impact on. This summer, you were also working with a mission trip last week. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, the UCC has a ministry called Reach Beyond Mission, and it's not just for the UCC. And my Baptist wife is going to take off for Washington, D.C. for their D.C. version of their experiential mission trip, which is to help kids get the link between charity and justice, which we talk about quite often. It's to help kids understand at an early age the difference between the charity that the church does and the public policy that the government does, and how those two things intersect in every
And
single
that's why
thing
it's
we
called
care
Reach
about.
Beyond Mission.
That's right. And so they have an Austin trip as well, and that's the one that I do every summer for many years now. I'm not even sure how many I've done, where they have a day at the Texas Capitol, and they come in, and I talk to them a little bit about how state government works, and talk to them about the committee hearing rooms, and really how that's the room where it happens, not so much the House floor, which often looks like the room where it happens, but it's really the bulk of the work of policy is done in committee. And then we do a mock committee hearing, and I'll tell you what, it's not the disaster you'd think it'd be. It's quite the opposite. They're really, really good. I have not been disappointed, and I'm going to jinx it probably, but I've not been disappointed by a single group in all the years I've done this.
So do you have them play the role of legislators?
Both. So I like to have them come up because it's fun to sit on the dais and under the seal and in the big chair.
Sure, yeah.
And I pretend that I'm a legislator, and I have this candy game that I play with them where the candy, I give them their least favorite candy, and it represents like their vote for my bill. And I try to convince them to vote for my bill and trade candy with them and use it just to kind of explain the horse trading that happens in committee. And it, I have to kind of wing it a little bit, and they never disappoint. All the different scenarios they bring up are awesome. The most important one is the poor last kid in my exercise who always gets shafted because I do not give him the candy I promised after he or she gives me their vote.
Oh my gosh, you lie to them?
Because there's an important lesson on integrity in the legislative process. Because as much as we may not like the wheeling and dealing, it has to happen.
If you make a deal, you have to keep your end of the deal.
Because they start where most people do, which is like, oh my God, this is corrupt. They're like, well, no, bribery is illegal and campaign contributions are regulated. What we're talking about is not that. What we're talking about is how it could be that a representative from Port Arthur needs something for the port, and a representative from Lubbock couldn't care less.
Right.
But needs something for the public schools. How do you make that work? And that is the legislative process, kind of a simple example in a much more complicated 150 of them kind of way.
Right.
That happens every single session that we participate in. And so to the point of not giving them the candy, I do end up giving the kid the candy ultimately, but I'll stop it and say, this child has just learned an important lesson in integrity. Because if at any point in the process you say something and others rely on it, it has to be true, you have to deliver, and you cannot lie, because the process completely breaks down. And that's how you end up with gridlock, or you end up with a bunch of legislators in another state breaking quorum, or whatever it may be. You cannot lie at any point in the process.
Do they get it? Do they grok it when you...
They get it. I mean, they really do. And that's kind of what's eye-opening for a lot of folks, is like, this is why it's ground down to a halt? Yeah, because somebody lied to somebody, and now everyone's mad at everybody.
And they don't trust each other.
That's right. It spirals out of control. But the body is no longer a body. It fractures.
Right.
People go to their tribes. It's not just two parties. It's often 6, 7, 8 different factions, and it really messes things up.
So you were telling me last week that there were parents in the room. Actually, first of all, before you talk about the parents, so how old are these kids?
Oh, they range from middle school. The high schoolers are a little bit more prepared, obviously.
Right, because they've had government.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the kids, I was sitting there. So the second half of the exercise, we switch. The parents come up and pretend to be the legislators or the sponsors and sit on the dais, and the kids come and testify before a committee.
Oh, wow.
And the kids are great. They're always really good. It's always super scary.
How do they prepare? I mean, do you give them any amount of time to prepare, or do they just have to come up and wing it?
I give them about an hour. So, I mean, they're kids.
Nice.
I'm not going to talk to them for a whole hour. My God.
Right.
I talked to them for about 30 minutes about the process and what they're going to be doing. And then they spend an hour preparing their testimony. And then we spend 30 minutes doing a mock committee hearing.
Nice.
It's really quite fun, and it really works quite well. And I break the fourth wall as the chair a lot of times and explain something.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's probably a little different for everybody, just depending on what situation gets brought up.
But so last week you had parents, and it was a particularly fraught day that you were doing it, right?
Well, I did it twice last week too. Yeah, Thursday and Friday. They're having smaller groups because they're just trying to keep the numbers down.
Sure.
The virus is still out there. I mean, And it was really interesting. I kept getting asked variations on the exact same question. It wasn't quite asked this way, but it was variations on how do I not just give up? Like, this seems like a really fraught time.
Yep.
I mean, they would even say it kind of personally. How do you do your job? How do you keep doing it? And I wish I had a great answer for them. I don't know that I do, but the honest answer was actually talking to these kids.
Yeah.
Gives me a lot of hope. It really feels like adults are failing the kids right now, but the kids, if we can just get them old enough that this younger generation, I'm always super impressed with their testimony, with their engagement, with their willingness to engage tough topics and talk about these topics, and with kind of the interest that they get from this experiential trip. You have gotten the phone call. We were in the car together one time.
Oh, that's right.
I got a phone call from a pastor where the kid had an experience and said, "I'm going to do this." Like this, I did an exercise that many of you have probably participated in, where I have you stand up and sit down to illustrate voter participation or non-participation in Texas.
Right.
And he was just flabbergasted and says, "People have to know this. How can he give me how he did that?" I was like, "Oh, absolutely." And it was one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest things, that shot in the arm of adrenaline that just keeps you going.
Yeah, right.
In this line of work, not because you are awesome, but because they're actually taking value away from it and going out in the world and doing good.
So do you think the parents do too? I mean, do you get the sense that parents are getting something they wouldn't otherwise have gotten?
Yeah, the executive director has told me that the reviews have been good.
Yes, that's true.
So
I've told you, and I
don't know. You never know. I mean, and the parents, I haven't offended any of them yet. So, and I'm keep getting invited back. So.
Sure. But I mean, do you ever get a sense that one of the parents is having an aha moment watching their kid learn about democracy?
Yeah, I do. The questions they ask reveal that too. They ask really good questions, and the parents ask good questions. The parents do too. Yeah, like they let the kids have the experience quite often, but often they're trying to lead the kids in the questions that they ask, and they also have a similar aha moments as well.
Do you have the sense that the parents are familiar with how many of them seem like they've been in a hearing room? How many of them seem like they've participated in the legislative process, or does it feel like it's new information for them too?
It really feels like new information. I have not had that many show up and appear to be pros or appear to have had prior experience. It really is like, my goodness.
We just really need more and more grown-ups and kids going in the building and seeing what happens and participating in stuff like this. I love Reach Beyond Mission. I think it's such a great program. And I mean, I think one of the things about UM Army that's so great is they are taking kids out into areas where they're going to have these experiences that, they're going to meet the people whose house they're fixing and whatever. But because Scott's there, they're also going to get that connection back to, if this seemed important to you, you need to understand, hopefully we get some synergy going and some of those kids show up at Reach Beyond Mission in the future too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when things get bleak, it is the kids in Reach Beyond Mission that really give me hope, and they've never let me down for all these years.
That's awesome.
I always kind of like, oh man, I've got to go take time out of my day to do this. And then I leave energized. And every single time I do that.
I know you always have a smile on your face when you're talking about it. That's for sure. Well, so one of the things that is a hallmark of summers is mission trips for sure. Another one of them is summer reading. Mm-hmm. So, on our staff meetings, we've been talking a lot about what we're all reading, and some people are reading novels. I actually, I'm reading novels. And another thing that people are reading is kind of catch-up reading on policy or political situations. Right now, we're in this kind of interesting moment staff-wise. So we're, and we'll keep announcing this over and over, we're going to take this 2-week break from recording Weekly Witness and sending the newsletter, so that we can prepare for the board retreat, which is coming up at in the middle of July. And the next time we record a weekly witness, it'll be starting to roll out what the board has voted on. To get ready for that retreat, one of the things that the staff are doing are reading. What kind of stuff are you reading right now?
Oh, for the retreat. Yeah. I mean, so not to bring it back to the Reach Beyond Mission kids, but that's one of the things I tell them is they often did not know that their church had a lobbyist. And I say, it's a pleasure to meet you. You know, if you did not know before today, your church had one, it's good to meet you. And invariably, I want to make sure they understand we're not just going in there making things up. We have a board of directors that is appointed to us. The denominations that are members appoint those people, and they make sure that we are in line, that our positions that we take are in line with their national denominational positions, and that there's a high degree of consensus before we ever go in there on something like that. So yeah, I mean, they are going to have to take a couple of they're going to have to figure out and talk about two really tough issues that we have not addressed. And those are the issues of abortion and gun control. We've worked on guns in relation to how we manage our properties because it's a private property thing. But, for tactical reasons, it made sense to be more of a special interest. But now, after Uvalde, it just feels like that's not adequate anymore. And not just Uvalde, but the conversations that we're having, the fact that the Supreme Court is now weighing in and preempting state legislatures from acting, it just feels like we're in a very different state of affairs than we were last decade.
Agree. Yeah. So are you reading, I hear you saying you're attending to some background on denominational statements, which, I know we've had the board doing some research of their own too, some deep dives into what our denominations and faith traditions and member institutions have to say about the issues. And they're not always linear to the way that it would present in Texas, right? So if you get a denominational statement that's kind of a global statement about a concept, still it's up to our board and us as a staff to spool that out into what does it mean when you see House Bill whatever or Senate Bill whatever. How do you draw the line back to those denominational connections? But I do think this is a time when, for us, there's a lot of kind of background reading on reminding ourselves what the thinkers in those traditions have said.
Yeah, it's a fascinating exercise to prepare such a document because you end up doing at least three things. You end up reading a lot of history, and then reading a lot of church denominational materials, statements that they've made over the years.
Yep.
So I have to put my seminary hat on. I have to put my history major hat on.
Right.
And then I did then my law one, obviously. I did something I hadn't done since law school, which is make a legal outline like you would do for a law final.
Right.
And I did that for all the abortion case law, of course. And what that is basically just you're reading a ton of court opinions and figuring out the rules that are derived from them. So yeah, and then you put it all together in a way that is hopefully helpful to non-lawyers, which is the next trick on top of those three things. But yeah, I've been reading a lot of legal opinions. It just this summertime's hard. It's always true with the Supreme Court terms coming to an end, but this one.
It seems over the top.
Reading nothing but law. Yeah. And not just the activism coming out of the Supreme Court right now, but there's just so much litigation at a state level, finding trial, district court stuff, state court stuff, appellate court stuff, federal appellate court stuff. It's just looking at all the different, trying to keep straight where all the different cases are and how they're all interrelated and which ones are contingent on other ones. And it has just been a really big exercise this summer.
Well, I think part of it is really because the number of momentous decisions that they're handing down just seems, usually when you think about Supreme Court decisions, you think, oh, that's the year when we got that one big one, or maybe those two really big ones. But it seems like there's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10 that are major decisions that are going to have impact for future state law and are going to set the table for issues that aren't even related to the issue, at least not the way that a layperson would see, not related to the ruling that came down. You know, one, I mean, I think Dobbs has been kind of cussed and discussed, right? But the one that's coming down tomorrow on EPA versus West Virginia, you know, I think it's commonly understood that's a climate decision, but it's going to have other implications for what administration can do to advance policy goals or meet pressing human needs right when we have them. So I do think it's more. I've certainly found that it's more necessary this year than in most of the years that I've been doing public policy, which is since the Earth's crust cooled, I guess, to be on top of all of the things that the Supreme Court is doing, because they just seems like Jenga. It seems like they're all just stacked on top of each other in a crazy way. But in addition to reading all the Supreme Court rulings, we are also reading and as a staff discussing a lot of kind of popular journalism, I guess, or policy journalism anyway. And I'm enjoying Bulwark a lot, and I know you are too.
Yeah, no, the Bulwark is a very interesting publication, saying a lot of interesting things right now. I know I tend to go to the Atlantic first and foremost. Almost every single night I open theirs and read it. Been reading a lot of the Atlantic stuff.
What are you reading in the Atlantic?
Well, this week there's been two really interesting ones. There's one by Ronald Brownstein, who the piece is basically America. His thesis is essentially that America is two nations sharing one geographic space, which is bleak, right? And also probably accurate. I mean, let's think about what we've been experiencing. It is a painful thing and we have to grieve this, because I know personally, I think a lot of folks look back to, you know, the 2000s and what made President Obama popular was his famous line that there's no red America, no blue America, just one America,
right?
Which I think we all deeply want to be true. But then when you listen to the January 6th stuff being talked about and seeing the lack of reaction, and really there's two Americas reacting to it in two completely contradictory ways, I don't know how else to interpret it, because it's just so egregious that we're at this point where a sitting president, with the intent and knowledge, would want to overturn an election or threaten physically a second branch of co-equal branch of government. It's just really jaw-dropping.
I mean, I don't disagree that it's jaw-dropping. I guess I wonder if the reality is maybe that there's actually more than two. There's, you know, we've had all these different analyses, the Common Ground Project and the Beyond Violence people. All of them are parsing the American public. Oh, well, and Anthony Lazarowitz and the climate reality, the Yale climate communications people, you know, are parsing the American public into more like, you know, 5, 6, 7 tribes and trying to describe what makes each tribe be what it is. But at a minimum, I feel like I heard some language yesterday about the particular January 6th hearing that happened where Cassidy Hutchison was talking, which seems to have been pretty explosive for people who would know if it was explosive. But somebody used the term that I'd kind of been waiting to hear, which was radicalization. You know, if you remember the early 2000s, the hot topic of radicalization of American Muslim youth and we've had board members and we've had participants, members of Texas Impact who have worked with law enforcement, Homeland Security on this issue. And there was always this idea that someone has to step in and prevent radicalization of people who are particularly vulnerable to that. And I just thought, man, to hear that term used in relationship to people who are, you think of as kind of from the American heartland and white bread kind of people. But I feel like there is that batch of people, and then there are Americans who are kind of feeling like I told you so, right? They feel like I knew already that there was something rotten in Denmark. And then there is another group of people, and this is kind of the one that I'm reading about a little bit, is people who are genuinely disappointed. I think it's really important what Liz Cheney has been saying when she'll say, it is disappointing to think that you were lied to. And, so the book I bought last week was by Brene Brown. So I'm trying to look into people's emotional state right now and think about what can we do to help people feel empowered to participate in democracy. Because I think a lot of people, when you said those parents were asking you, how do you keep going? I feel like that's real. We're hearing that from our members, that they're so demoralized.
Yeah, I've heard it over and over and over, not just last week. It took me to the point where I don't know the name of the book. I'll probably talk about it in the future, but it's sitting on my bookshelf at home, and it's on collective trauma, which is just way outside.
It's
policy,
way outside
right?
your bounds.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer it's kind of in my seminary wheelhouse, sort of, but again, not professionally. That's more the pastoral care stuff.
I was going to say, you don't like to talk about feelings even on Weekly Witness.
No, but it seems necessary to help people and citizens keep marching forward to protect their democracy, myself included, because it is hard to fight the urge to curl up in a ball at any point for any given reason on any number of things, and it's unique to each individual. But if we collectively do this, then we are in deep trouble. We have to keep slogging forward,
right?
But it's not just a matter of screaming at somebody to move forward all the time. We need other tactics to help encourage folks.
A little bit like yelling at the appliances
I guess I'm
cook faster.
Going back and getting those pastoral care classes from seminary I dodged 15, 20 years ago.
Well, so Issa and I were at U.S. Climate Action Network all last week, and one of the most helpful things that anybody said while we were there was the executive director, Kaya Chatterjee, who I find to be an inspiring person. But she was talking about how we're all ancestors, and that if we put ourselves in that position of, rather than being somehow recipients of something only, if we associate ourselves with the category of characters that we would refer to as ancestors and imagine ourselves in the role of ancestors later, how does that impact how we would want somebody? It's easy to kind of succumb to the feeling of wanting to curl up in a ball. I don't want my obituary to say she was famous for curling up in a ball, yep, right?
Right.
So I do think there are some people who can be inspiring. The thing I'm reading that has been the most inspiring to me, I have to say, is that book I keep talking about, The Ministry for the Future, which is climate fiction, a genre that I hadn't understood was a thing until I picked this book up. But it is helping me see what would happen after something bad really happens, how people would move forward. So I think sometimes reading can do that for us too. I wanted to go back to the Bulwark just for a second and just say, I'm so fascinated by how the editors and core staff of the Bulwark, which is this publication we hadn't even heard of until pretty recently, how those folks are able to cheerfully hold in tension their differing views. I mean, here's a publication where you've got people who clearly disagree with each other on the policy issues. They're able to agree to participate in a publication where some of the stuff that's in the publication is stuff each one of them would disagree with. I feel like that's got it should sort of be a teaching moment somehow.
Well, yeah, I miss those days, right? Like I've had this job long enough to remember when it was possible to have policy conversations and disagree, and on any number of things where they didn't feel existential. It just felt like a policy decision.
Right.
And you brought good arguments. And at the end of the day, you settle somewhere in an area of compromise and, you move forward. And yet now we're at a thing where people's very existence appears to be up for debate.
Yeah.
Which is unacceptable. And it becomes existential. I hate to be bleak like this, but I mean, we're at a point where I feel pretty good about the accuracy of the results of the next election. But beyond 2022,
it's going to be up to the people who vote in 2022.
That's right.
To lay down some markers about what they expect out of an election. That's
right.
That's absolutely true.
That's right.
Well, I guess, since Scott's not here, you and I don't have any idea when it's time to stop talking because we spend so much of the day talking to each other anyway.
I've seen Davey's hand over your shoulder, which you weren't able to see, but that was several minutes ago.
Well, then I think I'm going to say we should say bye to our Weekly Witness audience, and we'll be back with you in a couple of weeks.
All right. Have a good summer.
I want to thank our guests today, Sherry Miller, B. Moorhead, and Josh Houston. But I especially want to thank you for tuning in. The kids are out of school, but our homework continues to make sure Texas public schools are strong for our communities, kids, and teachers. There will be those that try to use religion as a reason to divert public dollars from public schools, so it's especially important that people of faith who support public schools have conversations with our representatives and candidates for office. And the summer's a perfect time to get organized and start to have those conversations. So let's all take a step in that direction this week. And remember, we'll be taking a break for a couple of weeks, and friends, I'll miss you. But while we're away, I hope you'll use the information from the last few episodes to guide your work. If you have questions or suggestions for the podcast, we'll be reading email, so please reach out to me at scott@texasimpact.org. And with that, it's time to draw this episode to a close. If you've stayed with us this long, you must have enjoyed the content, so I hope you'll share it with your friends and congregations and leave us a rating or review. That way, even more of your friends can find us and join in the movement for justice in Texas. And y'all, we know there's a lot going on, so keep an eye on Texas Impact social media. We will have announcements soon about Texas Impact's legislative agenda and upcoming announcements about our Faith and Democracy series, so make sure you're subscribed and following all of the Texas Impact channels. And remember, if you appreciate Texas Impact and the Weekly Witness community, please make sure that you and your congregation are members of Texas Impact by going to texasimpact.org. Y'all, there is a lot of noise out there, but your priorities are important. So let's get to work making sure that people are paying attention. The world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnan, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.